Now we'll go and take questions from attendees. So we have a question to the first presenter, Miklos, who was working on profiling behavior from smart meter data. The question is, can you give a bit more information about the process of getting access to this data set? The data set is shareable to reproduce results?
So it's a really interesting question. So I would say that it's a bit of a sensitive matter. So basically, when we were starting to write this project proposal, we contacted the company which was responsible for installing the smart meters, and they were open to have some data analysis done. And they agreed to help us. But the problem is that their project is over, so it is very hard to get any additional information from them. So we had to sign a confidentiality agreement with them. So it is not really possible to share the data. However, we are open to some common projects or common research, and that way possibly we can share some data. Also in my presentation, I have mentioned that we had a lot of problem with the GDPR as for the residential buildings. So that one we also really need to be careful about. However, getting any more data from a partner whose project has been closed, and basically there is also just a few people working there at this moment. It's very hard, but in case if there is like any possibility to further analyze the data and to have some international cooperation, like we might be able to get some additional information from them, as currently we are searching for data on the actual addresses of the non-residential buildings, as well as we first got only what kind of activities they are doing there, but they were also like just giving us it in codes. So it's really hard to process, and it's a really huge bottleneck of our project.
And if I can add a quick question to this question on the data set, how was this data, the houses sampled?
Basically, so when they were installing the smart meters, they were trying to get as many measurement points as they could. So they were searching for participants through a tender. And as you could see on the map of Hungary, there were just a few utility companies which were like really into this, and that's why it's not really representative. So they just wanted to test how they can install different type of measurement devices, and also like how they can store large data sets, but they were not actually interested in the buildings. And that's what we are focusing on, that if we have limited access to actual building data, but we have access to consumption data, so how we can derive conclusions only from the measured data without knowing too much about the buildings. So that's why we are trying all this like clustering and data filtering as well. So to see if there's, for example, if there's hot water production based on natural gas, or it is based on electricity. So we need to somehow deduce this conclusion based on the measured data. And it's I guess it's sort of, I would say for me, it's the beauty of this project.
I see. Thank you for that. We'll move on.
You are muted, Victoria, sorry.
Sorry, I did it again. Thank you for your answer. We'll move on to a question for Adeshir Madhavi. It says, validation is a known weakness of agent-based modeling due to so many degrees of freedom for even simple models. What would a credible validation protocol look like? Simple question.
Yeah, well, you know, I can talk about what I wish how the situation would be. I mean, I can picture an ideal scenario. In the ideal scenario, we would have a rich database of information about occupants collected for different type of buildings, for different types of use cases, for different type of climates. And we have this information, so to speak, in the backbone of a validation infrastructure. And if someone would develop a model, this model would, for example, be provided in terms of a round robin test or something like that, so that an independent entity would look at this model and would say, okay, how this model, which is developed maybe based on a set of local data, would function when we would benchmark it against this universal data. That would mean also that that model would have to have certain, let's say, devices, coefficients, or whatsoever that would say, look, we have collected the underlying data is for this type of building, for this type of typology, for this type of demographics, this type of cultural background. But we assume that certain coefficients can be manipulated such that this model can be also exported to some other conditions. That would be, so to speak, an ideal scenario. And from that, we could maybe derive a protocol. But the reality, of course, I'm conscious about that fact, that we have neither that type of universal database with this type of coverage and comprehensiveness, nor the people who develop this model right now have the, so to speak, the underlying basis to develop such type of coefficients that will adjust the model. But what at least we could do two things. First of all, the very primitive things we could do is not to say that our models are validated, when even we didn't have, you know, set of original data, you know, to look at it. So you could at least ask that for the model developers to say in which way the type of information, the type of behavioral data that we have fed into the model, where does it come from? From a more maybe, so to speak, higher level of observation, I would say we also should maybe move away to make the standard of validation correct predictions, because I think in our context, in our business, this is pretty much a non-starter. For example, energy performance of a building on a long-term horizon. But we would say, can the proposed model properly capture certain attributes of the data pertaining, for example, to distribution attributes, variance of the data? Is this model capable to do that? Because if it is, then we could use it not for the purpose of prediction per se, but in order to, for example, check the robustness of our designs or our operational regimes, and to say, okay, if we run this model many times, will we figure out that there are certain scenarios in which, for example, our design is not working very well? To conclude that, for example, I know from colleagues who work in the area of fire safety or evacuation processes, they can actually use this model to figure out if a certain design might have flaws, then in maybe 5% of the cases could be problematic. So that's a different, so to speak, standard of validation, not purely prediction, but the test of the variance of the data in order to look at the contingencies. I think that would be a good target.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting answer. I have a question for Tiansen Hong. Says, what is the future of zero net energy? Which kind of technology can contribute in high weights, and how to overcome overcooling and overheating of HVAC now?
Good question. I think so. The simulation results shows the occupant have significant impact on the actual performance of CNE homes. So I think one of the key points from the occupant's behavior perspective is, we need to design our homes or buildings to be more, interactive with occupants, which means, through some smart sensing, like if there's no people at home, we can turn off the lights, maybe turn off some appliances, depends on how critical they are, but also reset the temperatures, right? So, and the other perspective is thinking about the use of technology. Sometimes some technology may be, too complicated or need lots of maintenance and calibration. So those will not work very well in reality. We have to look at, from the people's perspective. So I think that that's, technology itself, high efficient, but also needs to be friendly for users to understand, and coupled with, smart sensing, and those are probably key to the Z&E homes, going to the future. Of course, I think the other dimension is, educate the occupants so that they're aware of, as the mechanical envelope, all those static, efficiencies getting to extreme. I think what we behave is very important, and that significantly influence the energy use.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to ask a question to all of the presenters. So how do you feel that your research relates to the other presentations that were in this session? I don't know if anybody wants to take the floor first. Whether you feel you can contribute, if you see a space for contributing between each other, and how do they relate to each other?
I think I particularly find interesting relationships between the research that Clayton showed and also I can't remember his name now, sorry, from Virginia Tech. So because they were all talking about personas, and the idea of recording occupancy behavior in this format of personas, I think can be very informative, especially for designers and for decision makers, because if you ultimately has to look at this also from the perspective of decision makers, not only to understand behavior, but also what to do with this recorded behavior. And I can see that there is a lot of gaps on understanding behavior, but maybe we should try to find different types of these behaviors so that it can be useful to decision makers. So I thought their work related to personas and these ideas of trying to create this modular occupants was very interesting, and I think can inform subtask 3 very well.
Thank you. And I have I think we can take more questions if somebody else wants to add something on this.
I'd like to add actually just quickly for the work that Miklos mentioned, like in terms of deriving occupants data from smart meter data or from existing databases. I think that would be a good build-up on what we're doing. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is if you're looked into load disaggregation by any means, like trying to see this electricity meter data that you have, if you can try to attribute it to different end uses, or is there any way that you could have any thoughts on that, let's say?
Well, the problem with this is that, as I mentioned, we don't know much about the buildings. So we can add a few assumptions, like for example, in case of domestic hot water production, so based on the natural gas data or based on the electricity data, if there is some base load, we can allocate something, but it's really hard to really distinguish between the end users. So
right.
So the good part of this data set that it's really huge. The bad part of it is that we don't really know much about the buildings that they are installed in them. Yeah. That's the hard part.
Yeah. Did both of you, both Mohammed and Miklos, did you find any particular problems with the resolution of the data? So was there a minimum resolution that you needed to do your analysis, or what were your findings on this?
Like if I would answer first, well, the resolution was good with the ECCD data. If you look at it, it's a 5-minute resolution. Quite maybe the resolution of some of the measurements and stuff. There are some issues. So there are some data missing, some data that have errors, and the reported temperatures. So for a different analysis, we were trying to look at the decay in indoor temperature, and for that, just having 1 degree Fahrenheit resolution versus more detailed in terms of measurements, that would have been better. But in terms of time resolution or temporal resolution, I think it was okay. But you always have those issues, and we have to exclude a lot of houses for different reasons. That's to answer, at least on our side. I can see, yeah.
For us, the main thing is that if you look at electricity data, for example, that you can allocate some of the uses, like how you use electricity. But for example, in case of metered natural gas, it's really hard to evaluate, for example, heating just from the natural gas consumption, because you just have some peaks. We had a case where we couldn't even determine like how the heating system was working, even though we had like 15-minute measured gas data, so we couldn't really do anything with it. So I would say that the resolution, really, the time-wise resolution, is really depends on which type of data you are looking at and what is the purpose of your research. Like, the more you know about the building, the more you know about your consumers in a way, it's better to have more detailed data. But as soon as you go into more uncertain areas regarding your building, so you don't really know your building or buildings, then you can't really use high resolution data, because in the end you would just end up making averages or summing up for, let's say, 5-minute data to 1 hour or even daily data, because you wouldn't be able to allocate proper consumption patterns to them. So
thank you very much. Yes.
Just want to add some, just in terms of like relevancies with other researchers. I think what Tianzhen also presented was quite relevant, especially when we're trying to look at the impact on net zero energy code and his work on the zero net energy homes. So one of the things I just wanted to clarify, maybe I missed it in the presentation, was the 3 categories or the 3 scenarios you're looking at. Was that somewhat arbitrary, or was that based on certain data sets or anything? So for that austerity, wasteful, and baseline.
Yeah, Mohe, I think for a question, I think so the standard behavior or the average behavior, I think basically those are the assumptions in the code and standards, right? And I think the other 2, so we sort of review some literatures. I think we have an article on these work under review. So some are based on a literature review, like those are typical, and some are from some limited measurements, like you have data from ECCD. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's it's interesting that we see the impact being stronger with occupants, especially with zero net energy homes. So I think there's a lot to that.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we still have lots of questions left, but we are already on time. So I invite all the presenters to go through the questions later on. And if you want to get in touch with those people that have asked the question. And now I think we'll give the floor to Stephanie and Bakker for the closing remarks of the day. And really thank you very much to all the presenters in this session.
Okay, thanks very much, Victoria. Thanks also to the chairs for these sessions. I think I'll give the podium to Stephanie, if you're going to stand on the podium and summarize the day for us, and then I'll say a few words at the end.
Okay, thank you, Bakker. So thank you for all the speakers. It was thank you for all attending. We had at peak, we had 132 attendees, and at the last session, 107. So it's really fantastic, really reaching out to a much wider audience. So maybe an online event, maybe that's, once a year, instead of a physical event. For every 6 months might be a way forward to be a bit more inclusive. So that's fantastic. Thank you for all the speakers and for all the attendees for as well the question answer. I really like the discussion session, specifically the part of the first session shared by Bakker on speaker and panelists having quite a rich discussion about the topic. And if I can just summarize few remarks, notably by Michael Kane. For me, a key point of the day was what is the relationship between occupants and the control system. So the first session was really on the focus on the occupant, the model around the occupant, and which variable may be at play when we talk about occupant and comfort. Compared to the going on to the second session, where more about control systems. So it's really and I would say the presentation by Philippe Agui was really putting this kind of two type of model in, you know, a question: which one should we follow, or should we look at them, you know, as combining them. So I think that was really interesting. Again, a point by Clarice just made earlier about the recording the persona and the modular occupant, again, picked up by Tianzhen Hong on his presentation, and I find it quite interesting on looking at a typology of occupant, and that was picked up as well by all the analysis methods that were used, notably cluster analysis of source, K-mean of source, or hierarchical model, and you can just find kind of like profiling of occupant, which is quite nice as well to see, and the different, exploring different techniques and models that we had in the last session with a point as well on agent base, which was really, really interesting discussion. So thank you, everybody. I hope you will to see you tomorrow. We have a second session again on modeling, and then followed by occupant-related research, but other research. And I find the title of Liam's presentation, How Does Teleworking Save Energy? That was actually an abstract I submitted about 2 months ago. That's really topical and really interesting. So I'm looking forward to listening to Liam tomorrow at 1:25. And then we've got case study, great presentations, Marianne as well on acoustic comfort and multi-unit residential building. I'm looking forward to this one as well. So yes, thank you for the day, and I'm looking forward to see you tomorrow. I'll leave the floor to Bakar to formally close the session today. Thank you. I can't hear you. Bakar,
oh, you're muted. Bakar, we still cannot hear you. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right. I'll share this again. So can you see the screen now?
Yep.
Can you see the screen? Yes. Yeah, great. Okay. So basically, these are the panelist speakers that we took some screen grabs from today. What we really wanted to do is to take a screen grab of everybody who were attending. We had 133 this morning, and currently we only have what, 100? We have 88 participants. We've gone down by 20. So we'll try and do that tomorrow to get some screen grabs of everybody, because that's going to be part of the output from the symposium, and also part of the record for the Annex 78 meeting. And the last bit is that Stephanie already said that this is day 2 tomorrow. We're going to start again by the registration, and then followed by the 4 sessions at the end, with one of them being just closing remarks. And it should be really 10 minutes rather than 30 minutes. I thank you again on behalf of all the team in Southampton, and I thank you for your patience if the technology did not work, but on the whole, I think we've done quite well with the technology, and this is the first time for us to try. So again, thanks very much, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, hopefully with more people. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Victoria. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Can
Bye.
I just ask chairs and hosts to just stay on the line, please?
Is that for tomorrow or for today?
Well, it's to discuss a bit tomorrow. There's a few learnings.
Bakar, I think we need to get you a new microphone.
Sorry?
I think we need to get you a new microphone.
Well, I actually changed computers as well. So, so it's not, I thought I would do better with this. So
because before really we could hear, I mean, other times that we did Teams meeting or something, it was fine. It was only today.
Maybe the best thing to do is to exit this and ask us to come in again, Philip.
Okay, yep, that's fine. Well, we can do it on Teams because I know Stephanie's got to go as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody that's still in the attendees panel, and we look forward very much to tomorrow's sessions.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're all gone.